Welcome to the Intercut Podcast, the weekly show going over the TV, movies, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I am your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, presented in a 4-3 format to preserve the integrity of Zack Snyder's vision, it's Arturo Zurita.
It's the new way to go, Zach. I know all three of us have dropped down letterbox bars when it comes to making our projects, trying to go the full widescreen. The new generation is going to go like this. They're just going to have those 4-3 bars that they're going to be dropping. Everything's going to look like First Cow.
Yeah, everything's going to be sized for Instagram. Also with us, she wants to live with Angelina Jolie. It's Amanda the Jedi.
Thanks, as always, for having me back on to talk about some movies.
Yeah, we always got to bring Amanda in when we've got festival favorites to pick. In a little bit, we will get to South by Southwest, as well as the Snyder Cut and our picks for the week. But first, make sure you're subscribed to the Intercut Podcast, either the video podcast on youtube.com/intercutpod or the audio podcast available on most podcatchers. Also, follow Intercut on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even Patreon. We are at Intercut Pod. That's Intercut Pod. That's short for podcast. Also, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That makes me happier than when you're watching a movie and then all of a sudden, hey, it's that other actor from that other movie. I recognize him. So shouts to Julie Bowen for showing up in The Fallout. Art, instead of the usual what we're watching, let's get straight into South by Southwest.
Let's do it.
A whole bunch of movies just premiered or had their new festival slot shown. You know, a few movies that we really, really liked here. We are going to go through them ranked. So we are starting at the bottom of the list and working our way up to the best movies at this year's South by Southwest Film Festival. So we're going to start it off with a couple movies that are maybe a stream it, maybe a skip it, depending on which side of the fence you land on. This is one that I know both of you have seen. So tell me a little bit about The Sound of Violence. Art, why don't you kick us off?
So The Sound of Violence is a movie in where a young girl loses her hearing after like a really crazy event that happened in her childhood. So not only does she have this physical trauma, she has mental trauma as well. Grows up to become a musician, and pretty much the whole premise of the movie is like, what if you could see, I don't know, violence, right? So in other words, she is able to record and see these colors depending on like the crazy events that happen in front of her, and she's kind of almost chasing this high. It is trying to be the story about like creativity to a degree of like when you're an artist, what are you doing? You know, this whiplash type thing where you're hurting everybody else around you to make the art that you want. A sort of velvet buzzsaw. That goes a little too crazy for me, and I think Amanda agreed in terms of, I guess the biggest factor here is, sure, there's the creativity aspect of her maybe going off the rails, trying to figure out how she can replicate these colors that she saw when she was young, because she's able to, I don't know, she has this like ability.
Synesthesia.
Yeah, to see them.
Yeah.
But then there's like a cop story that's happening at the same time that doesn't really get resolved, and it's like, that's fine if you're going to stick to your story being one thing. We wasted a lot of time with this investigation over here, and not enough time on the creative side of it, in my opinion. But it goes really out there. Amanda.
Yeah, I kind of felt that this was like they had an idea and then some visuals that they wanted to like get, and like the set pieces for those violent moments, and and then they didn't quite know how they wanted to like put it together in a way that worked.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so weird, and like I said, the biggest issue is absolutely the detective aspect, because like to me it just shows like, wow, these are really stupid people. They should have been able to solve this very quickly, like almost immediately. At least after the second thing that happens, they should have been like instantly.
She's like
known
taking out
who
equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so dumb. Absolutely stupid. And if they had left that out entirely, your brain wouldn't be thinking that, because you'd just be like,
exactly.
Oh, wow, it's crazy. But by introducing the fact that immediately there's these detectives on the scene for all this, you want it to be smarter, and it's not at all. It's actually quite stupid in a lot of ways. It is very violent. So if you are someone who just is into that kind of stuff, because some people are, whatever,
sure.
It'll
the
probably
slasher
hit
part of it
those.
is great.
Yeah, it'll hit those moments for sure. I think I said that I watched part of this with like a peanut butter jar moving around like the screen to try to block certain things, so I didn't actually have to see certain things happening because I just didn't want to. But and then it just kind of like crescendos into this thing where I don't even feel like it accurately like shows her decline in a way. Like, it starts with her being like relatively completely fine, and then it ends with her doing something that's so outrageous that because we've been following her around the entire time, it doesn't always line up. I guess, I don't know. It's weird. I definitely think that this is a style over substance type movie, and then it even loses some of that by trying to add the substance. So if it had just hard committed in a different way, yeah.
I want to get back to this peanut butter jar. Are you using a peanut butter jar to
Okay, so I've been watching a lot of these on like either my like a laptop, a second screen, or like my iPad. So this one was on my iPad while I was kind of, doing things. And I am sitting and watching them, but it's just so I can take notes at the same time. And I have peanut butter jar, so I just kind of put the peanut butter jar in front of the iPad because like the actual South by thing, you couldn't skip ahead. Like sometimes there's movies that I'll be like, just go ahead 10 seconds. So I don't actually have to see.
Don't need to see the violence.
Yeah, the violent
the
part.
violence is done in a way where she's trying to create this album. So she is bringing people into the recording studio. She is hiring like BDSM a duet.
That's how it's
and it's trying to record
slapping
them
noises
and is like actively hurting them. So it's like the Milgram experiment, but it's like 100% the person is getting hurt. They're not in another room. They are right in front of you. And she's like, all right, we're going to do this more and more. And they're like, can I leave? So it's like, it's actual torture. It's like, it's Grand Theft Auto. You're playing that Trevor level where you cannot pass it. And like you said, you cannot skip it either. So again, if you want a slasher movie, there is that. But trying to conflate it, I believe he said this was like a dedication to his daughters. It's to some degree in the creative process.
Yeah.
I don't think it lands there well.
Some people are going to like it.
It's got some crazy shots.
Yeah, I know a couple people.
Or the harp
that's
thing.
Where the harp. That's the one I specifically was like, no, thank you.
So I'm gonna hype it up if that's what you're looking forward to. Some crazy, what look to be very practical effects.
Yeah, apparently there's a short that is more brutal. So if you were into that aspect of it, because I wouldn't even necessarily say slasher, because I do like slasher films. I think slasher. I think Scream, Friday the 13th. This is like
going around doing
torture.
That stuff.
This is like torture porn type, like the gorer stuff. So I would liken this more like Hostel. And your like later Saw installments versus like a slasher flick.
The short is called Conductor. If anyone's interested to go check that out, but the main actress, she's also going to be in the upcoming Scream. So look at that.
There you go. Actually, so is Jenna Ortega. Jenna Ortega's in.
That's the movie she was going to be in. All right, damn, this next screen's about to be jam packed. What else we got, Zach?
We got another midnighter that is not a big hit with me and Amanda, at least. Paul Dude's Deadly Lunch Break. This is about a guy who has a pretty bad day and decides to enact revenge on all the people who he crossed on his very bad day. There's some comparisons to Spree out there. Amanda, I know you think those are invalid comparisons.
Yeah, I do. So Spree, there's like a couple similarities. Like parts of what Paul is doing, he's like recording it, but Spree is a fully...
Live streaming it.
Yeah, live streaming. That's right. Spree is like the full immersive live stream. He's got cameras everywhere. There is not a single moment of that movie that is not being told through either security camera, his cameras, someone else's Instagram story. Like everything is recorded.
Archive,
this is just... two things. It's like he's live streaming because of like a performance, and then it's just a regular movie on top of that. Otherwise, Spree also does not condone the actions of the person. It shows how a culture of acceptance can build around a person when we all know and are being shown that it is wrong and what they're doing is not logical and isn't okay. This kind of felt like what the Joker would have been if they were being honest about what Arthur Fleck was as a character. If we're being completely honest, like it's not badass. It's like stupid. It's like it's not okay.
I'd compare this unfavorably to a movie like what's it called, Tucker and Dale?
Yeah, Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Tucker and Dale.
I like Tucker.
I'm saying I'm comparing this unfavorably
to
exactly. That. In that, like, it's got all of these sort of accidental death situations going on, but I think it's so confused morally in the message it's trying to send. And it has that live stream elements, but like Amanda is saying, it's so much more integrated into the plot in Spree, and I think it does a much better job of being a cultural commentary to an extent in Spree, whereas in Paul Dude, I feel like the extent of the cultural commentary is like, violence is kind of fun, guys, and it just didn't.
Maybe we're not British enough,
the right
bro.
way. I also didn't find it funny.
It had some moments.
That one dude who thought he was Asian.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally forgot about him. Oh my god!
I was like, what? At that point, that's when I realized, like, okay, it has not clicked for me. Maybe it's just not my cup of tea, literally, because I heard that was what a lot of people were saying. It's like you kind of need to, I don't know, have that British sense of humor. There's another Filipino movie we'll cover in a bit that also has a certain style. But I don't know. Maybe it wasn't just for us, but I don't think any of us were favorable for it.
Because even the parts that did come across as humorous and like understanding that kind of comedy, it's what Zach says. It's like it's how it's trying to deliver the morality of the story, where it kind of gets like weird, and I just don't think it's clearly trying to make some kind of commentary with areas, and then it's not actually coming to what I would consider to be the accurate conclusions the way that Spree did.
Okay.
But, yeah. Or even like incisive or interesting conversations, you know? Yeah. Potato Dreams of America. This is one that I think we feel a little more favorably on, although it's a lot of movie written and directed by Wes Hurley. It is an autobiographical dark comedy about a gay boy growing up in the Soviet Union and his mail-order bride mother and their adventurous escape to America. Art, you told me this one was pretty goofy. Can you elaborate on what you mean there?
It is shot like with overhead lights for the entirety of the movie. Feels like a stage play, but it is. I want to say there's a lot of charm to it because I know that it's based off of a true story. Because even throughout the end credits, you kind of see all the people who you went through on this journey kind of be related back. It is a movie where it takes place in Russia, but they're all speaking English because they want to come to America. And once they're in America, you know, they continue that story going on there. I like the story. The way it's presented was too goofy for my taste. And there are other Oscar-nominated films that have done that ending a lot better, in my opinion, as well. But they went for it. Not for me, but I think a lot of people may like the story that this is covering. I don't know. I think you guys liked it a little bit more than I did.
Well, I mean, I think I'm with you in that the movie is a lot, although there is like a sweet story there.
There is.
I think there's moments of really fun comedy that kind of carried me throughout it. I think some of the choices they make with the characters are really interesting. You know, like when they're growing up in Russia, all of them speak with perfect American accents, and then only when they come to America does that change. It's a movie of choices. I would compare it to a person who is sometimes fun to be around, but occasionally you're like, all right, please just take a break. Like, you don't have to talk all of the time. And this is just a movie that is very loud and out there. I like bits of this. Amanda, I think you liked it the most out of all of us, though.
Yeah, I think so. I think I did. I totally agree, though. It does go off the rails a little bit too much in the beginning. I do find that there's just some things that, and it does. It's so the thing that's weird is that it doesn't commit to that through line the entire way through. It's like there's aspects that just get completely dropped the second they get to America, and I think some of it's an intentional choice. But because this is like an autobiographical experience, sometimes it just felt like he was like, I remember this specific thing that happened and it needs to go in the movie, even if it didn't need to go into the movie. And I think that I honestly probably would have cut down on the time in Russia a little bit to like flesh out some of the areas later. But I know other people feel the opposite, that they were way more into this like goofy, like charming, like kid obsessed with America living in Russia,
out of place,
and not as into the more standard coming of age. But I think that they could have done a little bit more on both, a little bit less on one side and a little bit more on the other side, and really made it like mesh together really well. I do think that there's a lot of special, like something special here. I think there's a lot to love. It does have a lot of charm, but it's so weird that some of it feels like too much, and then some of the other parts feel like not enough.
So you want a 4-hour cut on HBO Max coming soon? Potato Dreams of America.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, moving into some more of the stream it, rent it territory, we have the documentary Mao, which follows the story of design visionary Bruce Mao. Art, I think you like this one a little bit more than me. What did you respond to in Mao?
Just a story about him being a designer. I knew very little about this guy. Supposedly even started up here in Chicago when he had his own design firm, and pretty much went from designing stuff for the MoMA, like the typography and the font that they use, to then almost kind of redoing all of Mecca before them going, no, you are not allowed here at all. So it was just fascinating to see all of the different projects that he's worked on and all of the influences that he's had. I know that, they kind of call him out in the documentary, and even more so the more that I was researching him up, about him being very utopian and almost being like a philosopher or like a self-guru of sorts, trying to help people. But I found the story to be more fascinating about the way he designs things than the way then that the actual documentary is designed, because it's pretty straightforward. It's a PowerPoint presentation that they're giving you just about the dude. So the doc itself isn't that great, but I know that much about the dude, and I think it does a good job of kind of like recapping his life story, because it's not unbiased. He is the main guy talking to you through it. And if he's going to be the main guy, because we're going to bring this up later as well, if it's going to be one of those that Zach and I are always talking about, where he is in charge of telling his story, you would have expected it to be more creative considering the type of person that he is.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, you know, I didn't know much about him going in, and I kind of feel like I still don't really know much. I mean, I don't know if the documentary did the best job of saying what made him special. I recognize he's special. Everybody's telling me he's special.
The typography, bro. He put the little thing on the Coke cans.
Why? Cool.
He told Brazil, don't be racist.
A broadcast signal intrusion.
Oh, so much potential.
In the late 90s, a video archivist unearths a series of sinister pirate broadcasts and becomes obsessed with uncovering the dark conspiracy behind them. Art, what did you like about this one?
The score. It takes place in Chicago in the 90s. You're following this dude in what feels like his version of Chinatown, but what he needs to discover is what's in these tapes. He has all these archives, and as he's going through them, it keeps cutting out, and there is this weird, like, creepypasta type, you know those creepy things that they do where people wear, like, mannequin heads? That's what it comes off of, but you don't know what they're doing. But back in the 90s, they would have literally been considered pirates, you know, that were getting on these broadcast signals right in the middle of the news, and he's trying to figure out what it is. At some point, it does teeter between, oh my gosh, this is really creepy what these pirates are doing, to just straight up goofy. It's like, is it really hurting anybody? What is it really doing? Is this guy just in over his head and needs to figure out what's going on? Yeah. The man picks up the phone. He's like, I'm looking for this archive. And the guy goes, well, we don't have it, but the sticker says I need to report you to the FBI if anyone even asks for it. And there's so much in this movie that I really enjoyed, and I felt had a lot of potential, but doesn't quite get there. But I cannot wait to rewatch it again. Hopefully it sticks a little better. I'm going to shout out Murder, Death, Koreatown.
Ooh.
Oh, you watched it
Amanda,
twice?
I didn't realize you liked this one so much.
It's okay. That's the thing. I rated it the same as Art did, but like, it's just one of those things. Like parts of it got me. I like it's like the less put together somehow version of Under the Silver Lake, where this person is just continuously following these conspiracies to the point that it's all like, the movie even says, like, you're asking the question, so you're looking for the answer so hard you forgot what the question was. So something keeps leading him down. So like a specific thing is that he thinks it's related to an event that happened in his life that he's been trying to solve for ages and hasn't been able to get closure on. So he starts getting all these things, because at first it's like, whatever, pirates, you know, they're taking over broadcasts, nothing bad is happening. But then it's like, if you can link it to the things that other people think it's linked to, it becomes this next level sinister thing that maybe it wasn't at all. And it kind of guides his action. So I felt like after I was done, I wanted to go back and watch to see if I kind of caught things that were missing. And I think that the ending where he's kind of going off the rails with it is pretty solid. And then the beginning is really captivating to me. And it's like that part in the middle where he's kind of teamed up with somebody that gets a little bit weird. But I liked it. It's so weird that, like, it's one of these ones that I have to rank it lower because there's so much of it that doesn't work. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to talk about it with people so badly. I want to know what people took. Like, what did you think the ending was? Like, what is this? It's one of those.
It's the one you log in with the 3-star rating, but you had the heart on it so people know you didn't hate it. That one.
It's like the brain. I was like, my brain is very, very, it's enjoying the ride, but at the same time,
exactly.
Like,
and I love the tone.
So many ways it could have been better. So
Yeah, I get that, because like I felt like, you know, by the time we got to the first tape, I was like, oh man, I'm in on this movie. And then by the time we got to the second tape, I was like, oh man, I'm way out on this movie. It just tipped over that line into goofy for me. But there's definitely stuff there for sure. And I do like the unresolved nature of its ending. The United States versus Reality winner, a documentary about the whistleblower reality winner, the one with the crazy name, which they do get to in the documentary. I like that element of it. It's really taking you into a very personal retelling of what she went through. A lot of this documentary leans on both her mother and her sister, as well as recordings of reality to recap what she went through in in the fallout from leaking NSA documents. For me, I felt this documentary just didn't dive deeply enough into the story, or at least as deeply as I hoped it would. But Art, I know that you took away a lot from it.
Yes, and I got very intrigued when I saw Snowden was in there. I was like, oh, they got the boy in here. That's the part where I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down and fully pay attention into this. And it is...
Is Edward Snowden's life now just sitting down for documentaries about leaking?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
What else can he do?
Where do you expect him to go? And just a breakdown of, the whistleblowing and what she did and who she worked for and what it was that came out. All very interesting stuff. You go to the Wikipedia, you see how long she's there for and how they're still fighting for her release. But I agree with you. This and another one called The Return, about the girls from ISIS, are both movies where they barely scratch the surface on anything else. Because again, just like the girls from the ISIS film, this one is really based on her family. So it's more so not a documentary, but more a call to action. To be like, call your senators and let them know that they need to release her, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of a documentary, I'm being able to break both sides. The Return has this bit where they talk about a tweet. They're like, oh, well, they have allegations because they assume that something happened in this tweet, but they won't show you the tweet. Show the tweet. They do a similar thing over here when they're talking about the background between reality and why they believe that she truly is a spy. And they get a little bit more than what The Return does.
Yeah.
But they don't fully dive in.
It's a thing where, like, they go straight into, no, guys, she's innocent. And while I believe their explanation of it, I think I would like a documentary that gives you more of an objective reading of it first before then editorializing it, at least.
Yeah.
It just felt a little thinner than I wanted to. And like you said, it is definitely kind of like an activist documentary in her benefit, which is useful in some regards, but it's not the piece that I, as someone who has some familiarity with that situation, was looking for in a dive into her situation. Curious to see what we get into with this next one. Fucking with Nobody. Maybe our most divisive in terms of ratings. So, Art, you want to start us off? What
Junior
you like about
Price, catch this one in a matinee. Does it do a lot? It does so much. It is a meta movie with the word meta spelled with the meta coming down in the middle on this side. And then you zoom out, it turns out that in and of itself spells meta even bigger. I am a sucker for these types of movies. But, I don't know. I like beer. There's also too much beer you drink in one night, and there is too much meta that can also happen in one movie, no matter how much I like it. It is, as I try to pull it up over here, it is the director, is also the writer, is also the editor, is also the star. Doesn't even change her name.
Nope.
The story revolves around... Nobody does. But the story revolves around this couple who had a relationship prior to making this movie, and where she wasn't able to get the feature that she really wants to do. So they're kind of making an experiment, which is pretending to be in a relationship with this other dude who also has a partner, and he's gay, but he also wants to be an actor. So they create kind of this experiment where they post things on Instagram, and they're getting everybody's reactions to it from her workplace, kind of studying what it's a romantic comedy, studying romantic comedies while being a movie that's faking being a romantic comedy.
I would say less so romantic comedy, more so the fabricated way that people express their relationships on the internet. That then goes off the rails into like
exactly the amount of times that they pull the are we in the movie that we're recording, or are we about to record the movie that we're already in? It gets a little too crazy, but I did find a lot of the stuff to be pretty funny, the way that they play off the relationships. There's some sequences that go really crazy. I'm thinking one dealing with the cinematographer boyfriend, and where he has a daydream.
I hated that. I think that's where I lost it.
That
I was like, yo, homie needs help. And
I'll leave it at that. But it's also an interesting thing dealing with the creative process when you're including a lot of your own personal life, right? So I'm very curious to just listen to some interviews on how that played out, considering that a lot of the same people are playing variations of themselves. And that line that you have to draw, that when you're collaborating with other people on a film and they disclose something to you, it's almost like that journalistic integrity type thing. What is off the record? What is not? But then if you complain about something that you said coming into a movie, you're kind of exposing yourself. But that is part of you that's also being put on screen. Yeah. But then it's so meta, you kind of forget all those things because it's just trying to like one-up you with these tricks.
Yeah, I think for me, it just kind of hit a point where it just kind of went too far. I think it was too late at night. I'd seen too many movies that day. I think it just hit a part for like, I just couldn't anymore. Not that it got, it's so weird because like I was on board. I'm like, it's getting a little weird, but I'm still on board. I like the meta thing. And then I don't know what happened. It just hit a point where like my brain was immediately like, this is too much now. And I just, but interesting movie. So worth watching if you're like... Yeah.
Sounds like one that at least inspired discussion, so I'm curious to check that one out eventually. Let's talk a little bit about the fabulous Filipino brothers. This one is directed, starring, written by Dante Bosco, and also starring just about every single person in his family. I've never seen one last name in the credits for a film so much as scrolling through the... It's like they're in the cast, they're the writers, they're the assistants, they're the special thanks. It's a family production, which kind of lends a really good quality to this film because this is a film about a big Filipino family. It definitely feels like it's got that authentic voice in that way. I know a Filipino friend of mine who's going to really love this one, the guy who's been a fan of Dante Bosco for a long time. It's a little bit up and down is what I would say about this movie, in that it's trying to give you all of these different characters and go back and forth throughout time. And I think sometimes you really feel the film's lack of forward momentum, whereas there are other sequences that are really charming, and maybe it's the performances or maybe it's just the bit, like the whole bit with the sexy buffet, if that's what you want to call it, kind of worked for me. But I was a little bit... I found this one to be a little bit underwhelming. Art, what do you think of Fabulous Filipino Brothers?
Kind of similar to what you said. All the brothers are kind of playing caricatures of themselves, and the movie's kind of divided. They literally put the names up there. Duke, David, he's the weird one. He is the whatever one. And a lot of the jokes are pretty much set up on these outlandish premises, I'll say. If someone is like lusting over another woman, the punchline ends up being something very... I will say, without spoiling, very graphic. When it comes to somebody possibly cheating on their wife, the result, while funny, is also something pretty graphic as well. So there's all these various things, and where all the punchlines are kind of predicated on you kind of going like, ugh, out of disgust and such. But there is a charm to it, and it comes mainly in the ending, where they kind of flip the title and they introduce... a character that I think kind of more of the family that wraps it up. I also didn't know how big this family is in Hollywood. Their niece is the little girl from Birds of Prey that Harley Quinn is walking around the whole time. So expect the Fabulous Filipino brothers to be here for a while, because one of the things they talked about in their interviews was how they're always playing Mexicans, they're always playing maybe other Asians, but they never really get to play Filipinos. So they made a whole movie where they're not just playing Filipinos, they're also playing a variation of themselves and putting their own family up on screen. So I think this will, I don't know too much of Brasco's movies off the top of my head, but I think if people are a fan of them, they go all in with this one. So comedy might be right up your alley.
A lot of people love him from Hook, which is a while ago, but he's those fans are loyal, those Disney fans. Let's go rapid fire, Art, with a couple of these here. Talk about Women is Losers.
Women is Losers is a movie that's meant for people who are pro-abortion, but at the same time, it's the other side that is pick you up from your bootstraps. And they say both terms. I'm not exactly sure. This is only a movie that could be made for Texas, South by Southwest. I do think that the main actress does a great job. We've seen her in Green Inferno. I'm blanking on her name if y'all want to. I know it starts with an L. Married also to Eli Roth. And I do think she
Lorenzo Izzo.
Yeah, she does a great job in the movie. I love what the story is going for, but it breaks the fourth wall so many times to kind of speak to you and give you like this political point that's why I have to mention right off the bat that it is going for two separate things that they don't realize. Not that they don't mesh sometimes.
Feel a little incongruous.
Yeah, I feel like the people who are looking for the movie to be like, yeah, that's right, you should pick yourself up and make something of yourself, aren't going to like the abortion message. And the people who like the abortion message probably going to be like, maybe you shouldn't be overworking yourself the way you do in this movie. So I feel like it's going to be too jumbled for a lot of people. It still has its cute elements in there. It does a weird thing where, again, you have 30-year-old women in flashbacks playing high school students. No. No. But it's an okay movie. I'd say I gave it 3 stars. I'd say that it's a stream it, and if I'd say for an older generation, maybe people who were like raised during that time, I think it'd be something that'd be up their alley, even though it's trying to play both sides at the same time.
How about Witch Hunt?
Witch Hunt was okay. It's a movie in where I know the director was seeing things on TV dealing with border patrols and deportation and went, what about that but witches? And it's an interesting perspective to take. It's a world where all of these witches are getting gathered up, and if you have any witch in you, even at the school, they are testing girls by throwing them in the pool, and if they get sick or, if they don't float up, then they're a witch. And at a certain point, you get from seeing the deportation metaphors to then floorboards and hiding people in walls, and maybe it goes a little bit too much and it's not strong enough to be there, but it would be another stream it that I feel like if it gets picked up by Shudder, a lot of people are going to like the kind of metaphors that they have in the movie, but it's not as strong as it could have been.
How about We Are the 1,000, the Foo Fighters documentary?
It was cute. A bunch of people, 1,000 musicians come together, and they got David Grohl to go to Italy. Go watch. Grohl. Yeah, go watch the YouTube video. It's got 52 million views. That's all I'll say about that. That did not need to be a doc. That needed to be a recommended video after you see.
That's why I didn't watch it, because I was like, I remember this happening in real time. I'm good.
Yes, you're good. You're good.
Our Father.
Our Father had so much potential because it starts off hilarious. I saw so many mixed reviews for this, but I'm like, no, let me go into it and see what it has to offer. This is like a very dry comedy. I don't want to call it Coen-esque, but there's like a lot of sequences in where, and that's even bad. Forget that I even said that. It's kind of like it's trying to have these one-on-one conversations that it's all set up between the two. So it's multiple times where these two sisters who haven't seen each other for the longest time have to be reunited because their father has passed, and they have 3 older brothers who are their half brothers, and they kind of, none of them get along, but the whole journey begins because they're missing an uncle who they've never met, who's mentioned in the will. And you realize that these two sisters have never spent any time together, and it starts off strong with a lot of the commentary that they have where they're always getting hit on, but then they blame each other whenever the other sister is getting hit on because of what she wore, because of what she did and such. And by the end of it, it kind of becomes religious randomly out of nowhere. But it's more so a movie about letting go, realizing that just because someone's your family doesn't mean you're always going to be there with them. And I just thought it could have been stronger. It's also billed as a comedy.
But didn't feel like one?
It should have committed more to one or the other. That's the thing.
Yeah. What about Ludi?
Ludi is the story of Ludi, who works so hard that she has to realize she needs to take time off. It's, again, talking about women as losers. It is a Haitian woman who she's working at an elderly facility. She's working at all of these different locations, always just trying to get the next job. And it kind of like showcases how in her mind, she thinks she's like a hustler. She thinks she's hardworking. But to everybody else, she's like, you are a workaholic and you need to take a break. The most interesting part of it, I would say, is how she code switches between the different people that she meets. You begin the movie, she's talking to another Haitian woman, and they have a certain way of discussing things, not just the way that they speak in the terms, but how their language flows. Then she's with an employee who's black. They speak completely different. Then when she's actually working with her boss, it's just how smoothly. I'd say her performance is fantastic because of how she's able to be a different character, same person, but depending on the environment that she's in. And they don't stop to like overly focus in on it. She's just code switching throughout the entire movie, trying to just get by until she realizes that, the American dream really is just, I guess, an American nightmare that's pounding her down until she has to get more in tune with her own roots. Decent.
There's also the Brazilian, I think it was a thriller, Executive Order. Interesting premise for a movie about an executive order that sends all of the high melanin residents to an African colony. I saw a lot of really interesting responses to this on Letterboxd. A lot of people really debating the politics around that. But Art, I thought you think this one was just kind of okay?
Imagine you a character goes into a pool, just completely drenched in a pool. Then they come out and they're like not wet. That's what this movie is in terms of what it's trying to talk about. When you get into a discussion that's that deep, they don't say black anymore. They say high melanin, and they're getting everybody out of Brazil. It is way more violent and way tougher than what this movie is covering. And that's what I'm saying. If you're going to put a character in the water, they need to come out soaking wet. This does not do that. It is not going as deep as it thinks it's going, and I'll put it to you this way. As interesting as the subject is, bro, they do stuff like the main woman who's running this entire thing is speaking to everybody, and someone pours her coffee, she goes, black. It's too busy doing little zingers like that to really be invested in this world.
And not actually examining the politics.
And there's some questionable imagery here and there. Will it spark discussions? For sure. Think of it kind of like in the realm of New Order.
Yeah, that's the one that I thought of, and not just because they both have order in their title. Let's also hit Best Summer Ever, which I caught like the first few minutes of before the South by player crapped out on me. But it seemed like a pretty delightful family kind of musical comedy. And maybe the most interesting thing is that it seemed extremely inclusive in terms of the people represented from different, with and without disabilities on screen. It seemed like it ran the gamut.
It's a Disney Channel original movie that's PG-13 because they do kind of like swear, and they have like these sexual undertones, and it's pretty much this couple who meets during summer camp, and they don't know anything more about each other. But the dude is a jock, and he just wants to be a dancer, but his dad obviously wants him to be a jock. He goes back to school, and he's dating this girl who's in a wheelchair, whose moms are, I don't want to call them drug dealers. They grow marijuana, but they don't live anywhere. They just are always traveling. So she's like, Mom, for my new birthday, can we just stay somewhere? Ends up staying in the same school that the jock is staying in.
It's not a movie that I expected to have a marijuana grower.
That's what I'm telling you. Exactly. It's a Disney Channel original movie where two moms are marijuana growers.
Love it.
It is super goofy. You know, they just go into musicals. But yeah, it is very inclusive in terms of just having different characters be played by several people with disabilities from all across the spectrum. And I love the fact that when she comes into the school, you know, she usually a character in a wheelchair or any type of disability, they're always going to make that the thing they need to overcome. Nah, what she needs to overcome is being the new girl, and they don't like her. And the bully really wants to like polish our pay and try to tell her that, no, I'm going to end up with a jock. Is it cliche? Of course. Some of the songs are pretty catchy. And I really liked it. It's got a lot of charm to it. So I'm curious to see how they're going to roll this one out.
Yeah. We've got two last ones here, Delia, Derbyshire, and Ayar.
Both of them were in the Visions category because these are two documentaries that aren't necessarily documentaries. In Derby, the director takes all these tapes she found from the woman who did the Doctor Who theme, a woman who was a musician who decided, I'm not going to use instruments. I'm going to use just electronic stuff. And she becomes her. So she is doing the scenes as Derby. So it's practically a narrative, but it's considered a doc because all those sequences are based off of how she created things and how she recorded all those tapes that she did. It's a very interesting story about how she beat everybody to the electronic MIDI stuff before it became all the hype. And the same thing with, what was the other one?
Ayar.
It is a movie where for half of it, it is a narrative feature about this woman who decided to go to Las Vegas and leaves her daughter with her mom. Then COVID happens and she needs to come back. And the mom goes, you were never here. And then the movie stops to tell you, so what do you think about what you're watching? And then shows you a making of and Q&A of the movie you just saw because they were playing themselves. And that was the pitch to the movie. It's an interesting way to go about it. I don't think it fully stuck the landing, but again, that's what puts it in the Vision category. And just like Derby, it's this amalgamation of being half doc, half narrative, and trying to use the subjects themselves to not just play a version of them, but kind of also see what they could discover about themselves as they play themselves. Yeah, that's it. They were actors who wanted to be actors, and now they got cast playing themselves. So, if anything, good for them.
Yeah. All right, let's get back into the discussions with some more Stream It picks. Let's start with Kid Candidate. This is the first one that I caught at South by Southwest about this wannabe council member who records some videos that go viral, and then this guy decides to parlay whatever viral fame he has into helping his community. To me, it kind of felt like an extremely small-time version of Knocking Down the House, the AOC documentary that came out, because it is about
also
civic engagement and bringing a new, younger perspective to the political spectrum, except that it's just the town of Amarillo City Council that's on display here. I thought it was really charming. I liked the characters, and there's some really interesting points here, although it is a pretty light documentary. What do you guys think?
This was like one of those ones that it was like interesting to watch just because of what it was, but we've seen so many stronger political documentaries that aren't even real politics that involved young people. But it was kind of interesting to see. Yeah, Boy State, exactly. It was interesting watching this person just kind of like fall into this through like a meme, but still kind of realized that he cared a lot and wanted to make a difference. And he kind of, even though it really talks about like a strain that he had with his family, he kind of comes across as like a little bit of a mama's boy sometime, even though he's not a mama's boy, just kind of like he needed to be coddled sometimes. Like there was like moments. But I overall really liked it. I liked seeing the perspective of different communities where they were showing it. I thought it was really interesting that they got the existing mayor to be in it, and how I was like, get this person an Academy Award, because this performance is how I felt watching her on screen. I think for me, the whole thing really came together with what this area is potentially working with, and maybe a lot of different areas are working with, was when a relatively young girl was like, I don't know who I'm voting for. I haven't really looked into anything. I'm going to wait for God to highlight
to tell
a
me
name
who I should vote for.
Yeah, I'm going to wait for God to highlight a candidate, as if like literally the heavenly rains are going to come down and just highlight the singular name that she needs to vote for. And I was like, how do you make change when this is what you're trying to reason with? And that's not an insulting to anybody's religion, but that is just such a ridiculous way of thinking things. Like, you're given all of the building blocks to make the decision. So like,
it's not failing to take accountability for your own responsibility and being civically engaged.
Yeah, religiously speaking, you should still be going out to inform yourself. It is, and that should nothing about it not being a guiding factor for you, but you have to be informed, because if you only make it that, then that is where certain politicians will use that to their favor and just say buzzwords to get you there. I agree with everything y'all said. I do not believe a coming-of-age story should be intertwined with politics. You should find yourself elsewhere, and this should not be a self-improvement exercise when we're talking about politics. That's me. Glad you find yourself.
I mean, the documentary doesn't really interrogate its central figure. I forget the guy's name already, but it doesn't interrogate him that much.
By accident,
I think
sometimes.
It does recognize that the responsibility he's trying to take on is way bigger than the responsibility he's ready to hold.
Literally.
So, and I like that it recognizes the importance and power of local government. It's not enough documentaries dedicated to that.
There was that one guy who just told him, if you are not that interested, you haven't read this, then don't run. And I was like, thank you. Someone said it.
Hayden Pedigo is his name. Yeah.
There we go. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. This is one of several films in South by this year that have a COVID element to them, although it's not necessarily a film about COVID. It is just firmly set in post-pandemic times, and I think it's also reflected in this journey this character is taking. She is a single mother who is living in a tent, at least temporarily, with her daughter, trying to collect enough money to support them. And I think there's a really interesting drama here being told, just a very slice of life character study that in parts of the story worked better for me than others, but it's in the moments where it really resonated as something real that I appreciated this movie. Amanda, what did you think of I'm Fine?
I had kind of mixed feelings on it in a lot of ways. I thought I don't deal well with certain things where I know something bad is going to happen instead of them just making the bad thing happen. When you know that there's like a deadline or a timeline that something's working with, and you see the person like not doing the thing that you know that they need to do rather than it just being introduced. I would rather that. So there were some moments that were just like too tense for me to like want to mentally engage with, which is the worst part about these festivals being digital, because my mind will allow myself to be like, I'm going to distract myself away from this moment. Like, I'm not turning it off, but I'm distracting myself away from like this impending moment. I just want to see the fallout of the situation that I know is about to happen. I don't want to watch it go down. And I feel like so much of that movie feels that way, but it's also this very heartwarming story of this woman trying to like pull things together after losing her husband for her child, and just like the desperation of trying to hold that together without letting her daughter know how bad things are. So this isn't something that really affects her in the long run. It's just an annoying thing they have to do right now. It's not she's not being made aware of the full scope of what's happening in their lives.
Out of the 4 COVID movies, we had a Zoom one, we had a road trip one, we had a trapped in the house with your ex one. I thought all 4 were pretty solid. I like this one. I didn't think it was that bad. I agree with you. There is a point where it's like, is there really a happy ending when you, even if you accomplish everything you're going for on this day, you're going to have to do that so many more times, and I highly doubt you're going to complete the movie every single time. I still think that the kind of like journey that she goes on was still interesting to follow, including the parts where she takes her detours. But I like the way that it was shot as well, because they kind of gave the character an iconic look. You know, she's always on her skates. Yeah. You know, because a lot of these other ones, you're not really getting that because most people are just covered up in masks. Here, they were still able to kind of give her like a look. You can cosplay as her, I guess is what you could say.
Yeah.
It's a small touch that adds a lot lot of personality both to her and this movie.
But yeah, I still thought it was a decent one. I'd give this one a stream of close to a rent it.
Cool. This is one that I know that I think you have a little bit higher than me, Art. It's the documentary Spring Valley, which is a fascinating look at incident of police brutality in a high school that went viral. And one of the things that is really remarkable about this documentary is that it gets you interviews with pretty much everybody that you would like to hear from, particularly the 2 women who are two young women who are central to this incident, and the police officer, the SRO, the school resource officer, who committed this act of violence. To me, the thing about it that I was a little bit divided on is how much screen time they give one side of the equation rather than the other. There is a lot of time spent with this police officer who did this really horrific assault, and the documentary uses it to kind of let himself talk into a corner, but I kind of wish there was equal space in there somewhere. So I don't know, Art, what did you think that was so fascinating? Was it just getting to be a fly on the wall for some of these conversations?
It was the fact that when they brought that dude in, this incident, if you've seen the video, I'm sure most people have, it was the second time he had ever viewed the video. Sitting down for the doc, he goes, I've only seen this video once. He's like, didn't you like get prosecuted? Yeah. He's only had to see it once, and he sees it for a second time when you get his initial interview. I agree with you, Zach. It's not just even the screen time that they're given percentage wise. It's that he gets the entire first half. They're following his what is it, where he goes and he works out, and they go, I don't need to see the video. I don't need to see anything. I know him. He's good. He is not guilty of a thing. And while towards the end of it...
He's my friend. How could he be? How could he do anything bad?
Exactly. That he used the force that he needed to and whatever else. And it's just like, you kind of need a variable. Some people need a variable, sad as it can be, where they don't realize that they would not have done that if it was another person. And that's kind of what they're trying to break in. And there are conversations that he has, like he puts himself in the middle of having these conversations with other black women who are like calling him out, and that'll get very heated, and then they'll come back and they'll have another discussion about it. They really try to talk it out. I feel it could have been a little bit shorter, and I think cutting around the time to be able to actually showcase the women who were hurt a little bit earlier would have been better than seeing him, as you said, talk himself into a corner.
It's also just a little bit of like unfortunate addition that the very first expert they interview is Robin DiAngelo, who is somewhat famous for being the white woman who has the big book about racism. Just maybe a little bit more time spent with the black woman when you're telling a story about assault on black women. But I'm curious to see other people write about this one because it was a fascinating documentary. And after watching it, I had a really long discussion with my mom, who I watched it with.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. See You Then. I didn't catch this one, but I think both of you did. Amanda, what did you think about it?
Again, this is one of the ones I saw very early on, so not a lot of it sticking. But I thought it was it's just a very good, it's a very character-driven movie. It's a conversation-driven movie. Like they're going around from like a couple different environments, but it is very much just based on these two people who used to date. And then one of them just disappears one day, completely goes off the grid, doesn't actually end the relationship, is just gone. And then turns out she transitioned. So it's just one of these things. She didn't feel comfortable being where she was and just kind of had to just remove herself from the situation while they were in college. And this is kind of like the first time that these two have interacted in, I think, about 13 or 14 years. Long time. And it's just kind of like showing where they've gone in life and how things have progressed, and it's just kind of showing what's gone on in their lives, and how one has kind of abandoned some of her hopes and aspirations, and how the other one has kind of confined herself to certain aspects of life because of who she is as a person, and how she's just trying not to let those things really affect her. And it's interesting. It's really moving a lot of areas. I get that some people were annoyed by I think it was Lin Chen. Sometimes she goes like really far into complaining about certain things. All right,
thank you for saying that.
Yeah, like it gets like so overwhelming, but I almost feel like they were trying to drive that home so they could have that conversation later when Chris is kind of coming back at her, being like, you have this beautiful family, and like all you're doing is complaining about everything in life, as if it's not your fault that you made the decisions that you made in life, and all of these different things like that. It's interesting. It's interesting.
The performances are decent enough, but it is definitely one where it's like, the Before series. You are very much relying on a long take for the performances to just be heavy hitting and it not feel like they're reciting the script. And if they are reciting the script, which again, it's also very script driven, sadly, the most emotional parts are the worst parts. When they're having banter back and forth talking about, oh yeah, now when I'm flirting with dudes, don't they all do this? And they get to like banter back and forth. That works great. But what Amanda said, when they're getting into like the argument parts, it is written in such a way where you're clearly, I told Alina 10 minutes in, I was like, we're not supposed to like her character. She was like, why? It's like, well, she just went on an entire rant out of nowhere. These kids at this restaurant, aren't they just crazy? And I'm like, okay. I wish it was written a little bit better, because it is a very interesting story of two people who haven't seen each other reconnecting with obviously completely different circumstances from both of them after over a decade of not seeing each other. Could have been a little bit stronger with the performances, a little bit stronger with the script, but it's not a bad movie overall.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we got two COVID movies here.
Let's go. Let's fight them.
Opposite opinions about them. Art, talk to us about The End of Us and Recovery.
Well, the reason The End of Us is better than Recovery is because The End of Us
I think they're pretty equal.
Yeah. The thing with The End of Us is that The End of Us is a comedy about this couple who breaks up right before COVID starts. And then they end up being stuck with each other because the dude's not able to get another place. So he moves into the living room and they have this entire relationship that's happening, and where she's trying to do her work via Zoom calls. He's trying to do whatever he's doing during his time of trying to become a scriptwriter. And I found the comedy to be pretty funny. They're not as likable as the characters that you have in Recovery, which I'm going to let Amanda take on there. But I like the back and forth that they had in The End of Us. I thought the actors do a much better job at delivering their lines. In terms of the punchlines and such, they actually feel like they're riffing off of each other a lot better. They have a much better delivery and keeping a straight face, especially when they start seeing other people during COVID. And there's a lot of lines that I've been quoting. Is it a perfect movie? Absolutely not. But I think compared to other COVID films, it covers the beats that we all went through during that March-April period, but it doesn't do this thing where it's like, man, it's January and might go on a cruise. Maybe I'll do all these things. Maybe I'll do all that, which is where Recovery comes in.
I just think that they're approaching it from a different way in a different style of comedy. They're very different. Like, they're going for a different type of comedy, and I appreciate both. It's just that, like my review is, I'm only 20 minutes in, and I want to murder Nick. My thoughts on the end of us. Like, a character was just so just despisable at moments. I was just like, I want to like rock up into that house and just hit this man over the head, because he's like, I can't even remember what they're called, but it's like the piano that you blow in with the mouth.
You blow it with the mouth thing?
Yeah, and it makes the noise. I can't remember what they're called, but it was just like...
He just plays at the entire movie.
He's like such a man-child. And like Recovery, on the other hand, this is the kind of comedy that's just not going to work for some people, but I know people that are like that, and it's like it's sisters and they're riffing off of each other in like really ridiculous ways. And I think like kind of how Zach mentioned earlier, there's people that are like really fun to be around sometimes, and then they would just go too far in other times. That's probably what being around them would be like. But it also felt very accurate in ways, because there were people that immediately, when they're like, oh my God, cruises are so cheap right now, so we're all going to go on cruises. Like, there were people like that, and this covers that. And there were a few things in this that maybe went a little bit too far, but I thought that in Recovery there were jokes that kind of rounded back and came back, and you could kind of anticipate what was going to happen based on something that had happened earlier. So like somebody says something over the phone, and then somebody be like, oh no, I'm so sorry, somebody keeps moving our files around. Your grandmother's here. So it can kind of let you
that was pretty good.
Yeah, it was going to happen later. And then there's this entire subplot where they have to leave like not kindergarten, but like elementary school mice with this kid that's in her class. And every once in a while you just get a phone call from this kid, and it's like, it's pretty rough. But that kid did a good performance. Did really well.
The premise, whereas the end of us, they're locked into their home, having to live to each other. Recovery is a road trip movie, and where two sisters need to go rescue their grandmother
from an old folks home, basically from a nursing home,
because everyone's getting it, so they're in a rush to get there as fast as possible.
Yeah.
It has a lot of Broad City vibes as well. I would say a lot of people were really pushing that, and I know a lot of people were reviewing it in that way. My only thing there is I think that a lot of it feels more scripted, and I didn't realize that they're from Studio C. And I think that they're hilarious on Studio C, and they riff on each other better when you allow that improvisation to be there. Here it felt like they were definitely hitting the lines that were already kind of written down, and I was like, I feel like the best part of riffing is where you have a point A, point B, and then have magic trying to get there. But the second half is much stronger in Recovery. I like how a lot of the jokes come back. To play.
I think it's good. And then the end of us, I feel like, is more of like the passive aggressive comedy. Like they're saying things, so like we're being super respectful, but also like I'm stabbing you with my words right now.
That's what it is. It's a very condescending comedy, and if you like condescending comedies, there's the end of us. If you like a more joyful road trip COVID movie, then definitely check out Recovery.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's wrap up the Stream It section with 3 documentaries here. First up is the Oxy Kingpins. It's a pretty effective documentary showing you the proliferation of the opioid crisis through the perspective of the dealers and also the pharmaceutical companies who are really pushing this drug, and the lack of accountability that the higher up the ladder you go, the less responsibility falls onto you. And it does that through a lot of interviews with ex-dealers and ex-users, and in a really compelling way. It's a solid look at what is obviously one of the major issues of our time. Art, you liked it too?
I would give it a rent it. I'd give it even more than a stream it. I think it was a solid documentary looking into it. I feel like it shouldn't change anybody's mind. I feel like we all know this, that the Oxy Kingpins isn't your drug dealer up the street. It is these actual kingpins who run everything. And they know they're not going to get caught. They have already set aside fraud money, lawyer money, all these different things. They're not showing up to these cases. They send their lawyers. There's that one scene where they're trying to prosecute them in Las Vegas in terms of how everything works, how you're supplying so much to Florida and Las Vegas, knowing that there's not enough people there. Forget the people who need it. If the entire population was taking it, that's still too many pills to be sending there.
Yeah.
Like, at what point do the people up on top not realize I wonder where all this stuff is going. They take into account the clinics getting robbed. They take into account that when the suppliers, which are also known as doctors, are prescribing these medications, they can get caught. But the head honchos who run the entire thing, they are as clean as can be. They already have set aside all of the fees and money that they need to pay it all off. They won't show up. And there is that scene where they're in front of the judge and none of the people have shown up. It just goes, so-and-so representing this company, so-and-so representing this company, and it does a great job, like Zach said, showing you people who, there's a lawyer kind of interviewing a couple of people because he's the one who's trying to prosecute these really big companies to kind of show you who gets hurt amongst it all. But the craziest part is that the movie opens up with a graph. It's a map of America, and it shows it to you in the 90s, and it shows you the little spots, right? The hot spots where it's growing. And then it shows it to you in 2000. And then it shows it to you in 2010. And then it shows it to you where it's like now. And you're like, at no point did anyone care to stop it. And that speaks volumes. So I'd recommend it.
Yeah. Another one of the documentaries, Demi Lovato Dancing with the Devil. This one's probably going to be available on YouTube pretty much by the time this video is out. I thought it was compelling to see Demi Lovato be so open about her traumas but the thing is that this all feels a little bit too fresh to me. You know, there's a moment where she's talking really enthusiastically about her new relationship. And if you've been paying any attention to celebrity news, you know, that is about to head to a bad place. I feel like there is an interesting documentary to be made about what she went through, and we might get that in a few years' time, given that she seems to sit down for documentaries like this quite often. This one just didn't dig quite deep enough to me, even though, you know, it's refreshing to see most of this handled pretty honestly. It does feel a little bit surface level to me. Amanda, what did you think?
I really liked it, though. I think you raised an interesting point about it being really fresh. They said that originally this started as a documentary that was supposed to come out in like 2018, like something that they were working on for like one of her releases. And I almost wonder, like, did they contractually have to have this out by like a certain time so that they just shifted it to overcoming, like talking about what she's going through? And the big thing is it obviously goes through her overdose and her substance abuse issues, and then she reveals some things that she hadn't revealed before of things that happened to her that night and years ago, things that we know happened to most of these Disney stars and most of these people, and then she says it without saying names, but I do think that there was a concerning moment later on where, and I almost feel like when she said something, they should have been like, we probably shouldn't release this. And it's when she says, I am not somebody who is all or nothing. I am experimenting. I want to be able to smoke marijuana, and I was like, okay. And then she says, I also want to be able to drink in moderation. And that's when I was like, I don't think you can do that in moderation without it turning back into like what it was.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their own struggle with
it's honest though,
but
it's
at
honest.
The same time, she's really honest about it. But at the same time, I think this gets back to what I'm saying. It's so fresh.
Too fresh. We don't know how that's going to play out.
And she's also a role model, being the Disney Channel star. And I know she's saying, like, the mom continuously says, this isn't something that she wants. This isn't something that she asked for. I mean, you start in a lot of Disney Channel stuff. I feel like you know the platform that you're getting into. But a lot of these docs do that. Well, they'll encroach right on that territory of being like a bad influence, and they'll be like, well, this is what I'm doing. And then they'll have that one talking head. And in this case, it was Elton John, right? Who just comes out and says, stupid, that'll never work.
Yeah. And this is after he's been
I'm gonna trust Elton John.
Yeah. He's like, she's amazing, she's brilliant. This is stupid. It's not. This is not going to work. I think that there's ways that, and like, I'm not an expert, but it's just the nature of what she was addicted to compared to alcohol is why I think alcohol specifically would be a really bad idea for her to even just venture into, because it is so easy for one drink to turn to 2, to turn to 3, to turn to 4, to turn to 5. I'm glad she has like a team of people around her and stuff, but again, it feels too
But even that
soon.
team. Tell me, so one of the big factors that they do, because I believe it's split into 4 episodes, maybe 5, and even my mom, she was like, no, I already saw this. I was like, no, that was her other YouTube original series. She's got a lot of documentaries, a lot of these things that she's able to, I guess, release as a part of album stuff, but a lot of the beginning was really just kind of defending her friends, kind of just like reminding the audience, hey, my friends weren't guilty. Hey, my friends were guilty. And it feels like that's a lot of what they spend the time doing there. And again, seeing a lot of other stuff that has come out in the news for her, I wish that they would break down other stuff that Demi has gone through. As she says it in the trailer, I'm just going to record everything and then I'll edit it out later, which kind of defeats the purpose of recording everything if you're going to follow it up with, but I'm going to edit it out and trim it out to be what it needs to be. Yep. Like Zach said, there will be a point where we don't have these documentaries where it's co-signed by Demi sitting next to her security guard manager. Scooter Braun. It will be something.
Yeah, they do this thing where they say like, oh, everybody's going to be really honest, but you also see cuts. Demi, they show it in the documentary, coaching them before their interviews. Yeah. So, and wrapping it up with the Alien on Stage documentary, I thought this was a charming look at this British production that goes from basically community theater all the way to the West End. You know, you got some charming characters, and the way that they try to recreate what should not be possible to do on a stage, especially in a low budget production. It has some fun moments, but it's charming and not much else. I thought. Art, same.
Same thing. It's just a bunch of bus drivers who love to chain smoke, and they were like, what if we just did this thing together? And they're like, sure. And the dude is directing it. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but they end up in London, and it's cute, I guess.
Yeah. All right, one more rapid fire segment for Art here as we start with the junior price options here. Some more recommended movies. Let's start with WeWork or Making and Breaking a 47 Billion Unicorn. This one is going to be available on Hulu, I think, in April, so not too long for now, about the rise and fall of the co-shared space company. What do you think about this one, Art?
I would give this one a rented, and considering you could like get Hulu, you rent that bad boy, which is would be what, $4.99? I don't know how much Hulu is. You get a whole month's worth. This is a very interesting look at WeWork. If any of you guys know anything about that, it is that space that became very contentious because he was able to build an environment where it was very cheap for people to come in, but then people are like, aren't you kind of just duping real estate, kind of like how Airbnb tried to do some stuff? What I didn't know is that WeWork became We Live, became We Grow, became We is a cult, is practically what it is. I will say the one problem with it, I wish it was edited a little bit better, but I also wish that they got more from his perspective and how corporations were really going up against him. They really like to focus on how he's trying to dupe all these corporations, which for sure, but there's also how he was a threat to what was happening and why they really wanted to get him out of it. And they don't really cover it that deep. It's like trying to cover Steve Jobs, but never saying anything bad that Steve Jobs ever, or I guess would be a little bit the flip side of it, of him getting kicked out. I just feel they could have fleshed it out a bit more, but there was clearly a narrative that they were implanting to get to in its third and final act about who they were really trying to indict. But nonetheless, I think it's very interesting to look at, because if any of y'all are involved in some sort of WeWork type thing, just know that cults are no longer just their independent things. They can be corporate. So that's what WeWork is.
How about Trapped?
Trapped is really interesting because it's about these several women who are kind of trapped in, I forget what the town is, and they're not able to escape. So they kind of have to play off of being trapped in a lobby and the guy not snitching. Another woman being trapped in a house where she's got this one-on-one with this little girl who doesn't really want to let her in, but realizes that if she goes out, she might get hurt. I thought it was a really interesting movie. I would recommend it. I would give this one a rented as well. It's more so kind of like a thriller while at the same time being a drama. I can't find the rest of the notes that I had for this, but I would recommend this one as well. I was listening to some interviews about the director and what she had to go through to be able to film this, kind of in a way where it's like she's not really allowed to, but nonetheless she wanted to make sure that she got it done. And I believe it was the first submission for her country at South by. So that was like the big thing that she was proud of as well.
Interesting. You have a trio of music documentaries here in Alone Together, Under the Volcano, and Tom Petty, Somewhere You Feel Free. What do you think about those?
The Tom Petty one's definitely for the Tom Petty fans who want to see how he made that album. It's interesting to hear Rick Rubin talk about, what he attributed to it, how he went from being a group to then just being Tom Petty, who brought the entire group with him again. So if you're interested in Tom Petty, I think it's a really good making of that doc. When it comes to the Charlie XCX doc, I like that one even a little bit more because it was about the album that she made during quarantine, and it's spliced. They splice in a lot of, I want to call them like Zoom interviews or calls of her fans and how they, they've been inspired by her and how they look up to her. But it's the making of her album that I thought was pretty fascinating because it's her at home. No makeup, no nothing, just trying out different things. And whenever she doesn't know a lyric, she's like, I got to workshop a lyric. She'll go live on Instagram and be like, I'm thinking one of these two. So it's like this really lived in, for a quarantine album where she was able to reach out to her fans. And I thought it's a pretty interesting look, even though I would say it's more so not a documentary, but when you get the album on iTunes and you go to like the extra features, it should be that. And then
that's a lot of documentaries.
That's a lot of documentaries, yeah. But Under the Volcano was fascinating because it is about this recording studio in an island where, it begins and it shows you how it's just completely covered up and no one can go to it. And then it goes back and it tells you all of these damn masterpieces that were recorded in this place, from the Police to, I think they had Duran Duran there, a little band called the Beatles. So that's a documentary that I think is going to get a really big release because there was only three timed films, which means that you only had a specific amount of time to see it. Limited window. Yeah. That was the Demi doc. That was the Tom Petty one, and it was Under the Volcano. It was actually the closing film to the fest, even though they said the Charlie one was. But that one was pretty good. I highly recommend that one because it's not just the making of one group. It's how this studio in this island just had all of these legends come in, and it would have been a spot for tourism if the volcano didn't erupt, and now it's completely covered and no one can go to it.
Damn.
There's another one here that is one that Amanda and I are both upset we didn't get around to, but tell me about Swan Song with Udo Kier.
Is it cheesy? Is it corny? Yes. 100%. It's about this man who's actually based off of a true story. This comes from the director who did Edge of 17. And
oh, cool.
He was really fascinated by this dude who was a hairstylist and was the best one. I think it's Ohio, best one in the land. And in the story, that's kind of what it's based on. And he needs to go do a funeral. What do you call it when you have to? I don't know if there's a specific name for it. He needs to go do the makeup for the woman who's going to have the wake.
Oh, like the mortician, like the mortuary.
Exactly. Yeah, but she wants a specific haircut. And only he can do it. But the thing is, he needs to find the supplies. So he's got to go and get all of these supplies, and he's like interacting with different people. I know the director said it was a love letter to gay culture, that pretty much, and you see it in a lot of the conversations that he has as he meets past acquaintances, where now it's in the mainstream. That being gay a decade ago, 2 decades ago, is completely different than what it is now because it was a completely different culture. I would mention another short here. I don't know if you guys got to catch it. The World Trade Center one.
No, not yet.
I'd bring that one up in here as well about a just completely different culture that's cultivated when being gay isn't something that you could just go out and do in the open. And how now that it's something that you see in movies and that corporations use as a very positive thing and how it's changed that culture completely, and how he's kind of like the last one of that dying breed who doesn't take crap from anybody. Again, very corny, very cheesy, but he's got some zingers in there that I thought worked out pretty well, and it's got a very cute ending. I wish you guys caught that one. We could have talked about that one.
Yeah.
I'm bummed.
Have a few documentaries here. Let's start with Subject of Desire.
You ever see a documentary that's really good? Breaks down what black women have gone through. Nothing new. Shouldn't be anything new. Should be a lesson for some people in case they don't know how, people have been twerking for the longest time, but it's not until Miley does it that it's no longer ghetto. How, certain hairstyles are not allowed in the workplace, but if somebody else does it, then it becomes a trend. Mm-hmm. Why is Rachel Dolezal in this movie?
Well, like as an interview subject?
As an interview subject with the credits playing and showing you the interview subjects and where they are now, and her also getting one. Very, very interesting choice in a movie where they're talking about how black women get commodified, get all of their stuff just taken away and used, only for them to never really get the credit. And to not have at least, man, they're pushing trans race, but they didn't have a trans black woman in it. I think that's a very interesting choice to go about it. And it's definitely done in a way where she is the interviewee. She is coming out a lot. This is very much pro her being able to do her thing and showcasing how, I don't know, Zach. There's so much good in this documentary, but then they sprinkle in this Rachel Dolezal thing in there, kind of defend her from the Netflix doc that came out, and I thought it was a choice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What about polysertrine?
I'm trying to remember which one. Okay, this is the one where the daughter of a musician who was like this just punk rock star, I think it was in the UK. She did her own thing, never tried to be sexualized, was always going in and doing what she wanted to do, even though she didn't have the look of what people thought she should be. And this is her daughter recollecting everything that she has. And I believe it's narrated by Ruth Negga, who does everything that the daughter would be thinking of. And I thought it was a very interesting look at her progression as an artist and the different things that she went through, realizing that she couldn't really hold a family if she wanted to continue being an artist. But then was she going to become that cliche of not being able to hold a family when your real dream is to become an artist? I thought it was a pretty good look at her story, and how it's affected her daughter, and how Polly herself was an inspiration to a lot of people, but she never got the credit. It took the archives to realize it.
Luchadoras?
Luchadoras was also a really good documentary that just shows you how disgusting it is. There's one profession you should not be having in Mexico, and that would be being a luchadora, because if dudes don't give a damn once the bell has rang, they're fighting men as well. And it is a very crazy look of what they have to go through in trying to keep this profession and wanting to be a part of it. Imagine, a Latino glow, where there is no budgets and no residency in Las Vegas in the future for these women, but they're doing it because they love it.
Introducing Selma Blair.
Any of y'all catch this?
No.
Nah. These are all ones that only you caught.
It got picked up by Discovery Plus, and unfiltered, bro. If you wanted a documentary that just showcased an actress who for the longest time has been a supporting, that's why the title is Introducing Selma Blair, that she finally gets to be the lead, and it just showcases everything she's going through with MS. I know people who have MS as well, and it's a hell of a damn thing, bro. And she captures things on camera that she has tried very hard to not, have in the limelight, but it's one that you have to see her progress. You have to see her day-to-day stuff. Is it depressing? Extremely depressing, but she is opening up her life for you to see it. It's going to be on Discovery Plus, so if people are interested in catching that, I think she goes completely unfiltered in showcasing to you that she's got some of the best people helping her out, and yet it's still hard for her. So now imagine your average person who's going through this disease,
Right. Very interesting. What about Hysterical, the women comedians documentary?
This one's also going to come out on Hulu because I think it's part of like the FX partnership thing that they have going on. If you have HBO, they also have a series of comedians that I think they did a partnership with CNN. They have a really great episode there about female comedians coming up. Every single comedian that they didn't cover in this one gets covered in this one. And then the ones that, vice versa. So I think they complement each other very well. The one on HBO and this one that's going to be on Hulu. I thought it was a very interesting look at just everything that these women have to face when becoming a comedian. I always just love seeing the come up that different comedians have, where they play, what they showcase, but obviously the different obstacles that they have to go through, how they have to set up a joke in a certain way, because when you come out as a female comedian, they're just waiting for the dude to come out. They showcase to you the history of how comedy has worked and who gets to have the stage, how moderators have it where if it's a woman, well, then we need to have two dudes and then another woman to come in, and just how they don't really get the platform to do as many sets. Obviously, they bring up the Monique situation where she doesn't get the same pay as others would, and how that Monique situation had changed from like, does she really deserve it, to now being able to have that move up in court. With her lawsuit against Netflix. I thought it was pretty enjoyable. Like I said, it's going to be on FX, but definitely catch the CNN one as well.
And then The Hunt for Planet B.
This one might be a very high junior price, almost combo. Zach, this you and I ignored. We said, what do we need to see a documentary about hunting for another planet? This is a documentary about hunting for another planet where every single person who they are interviewing who's working on this program comes from a religious background, comes from a background of grief, comes from a background of being discriminated, maybe one of just having everything in their favor. It is showing you every single aspect of the human psyche and also what they go through. Look at this person as we're following them. They're stuck in traffic. It is showcasing to you what we do here on Earth through all of these different people. It's very smart and kind of telling you, as all these people are looking for this different planet, aren't we just going to do the exact same thing? Are we just looking for another planet to pretty much just take over? I think it is beautifully edited. They bring in, let me pull it up right here, the woman who Jodie Foster played in Contact.
Oh.
Jill Tarter, an astronomer. She's who inspired that character in Contact. There's a certain point where they ask her, do you believe there is life out there? Do you believe? And she goes, doesn't matter what I believe. She gives this killer quote about how for millennia we have asked philosophers, religious people, prophets, what do you believe? And she's like, it's not about believing. It's about what can we explore? And I thought that was dope because she talks about how we haven't even searched the water here on Earth, our oceans.
Right.
We've done a fraction of that. We haven't even touched the sky. She'd be like saying that there's no aliens in the sky or any form of contact would be like putting a cup in the water, checking to see if there was fish in there and calling it a day. You don't do that up at the sky. And they launched this bad boy out there, and I can't wait to see the Hunt for Planet B Part 2. They did a great job with this one and not just exploring this telescope and what they're getting up there, but what humans would really do. We would just move on to the next planet and ruin it just like we did with Planet A.
Cool. And tell me about Gaia.
Gaia's going to get sued by Naughty Dog because while this is a fantastic horror film, if you want to call it that.
I missed it.
They are straight up clickers. So the story revolves around, it's this period of time where these two park rangers, I think, they lose a drone. She goes out to look for it, gets caught up with this little village community, if you want to call it, a group of people who are living out in the woods who use these flowers and stuff, the plants, to get different things out of them. But there are also creatures in the woods that when they appear, there's particles, there's sprouts everywhere. They come out and they look exactly like the clickers from The Last of Us. I hope it comes out because it also got distribution from Neon, according to them.
Oh.
I had to go back and recatch it because I was like, what if they don't release this and they do get DMCA'd? But then I remembered Naughty Dog can't do that because didn't they do that for Elliot's face when they did
That's
Ellie?
true.
You know what I'm saying? I was like, hey, look
They're
at
like,
that
it's
come back
not
to bite you.
Elliot.
Look at that come back to bite you. So at that point, it's still a movie that really loves, what's his name from Annihilation?
Shoot, Alex Garland.
Loves Alex Garland's filmography. I would just put it that way. But it's still it's got a lot of religious undertones as well. It recreates a lot of religious scenes as they're trapped in the woods and they're trying to get out. And it's kind of talking about almost like In the Earth, how the Earth itself is coming back to fight for all of the damage that we've done to it. So I guess it goes well with Planet B.
Yeah. Two more here. Islands, which I heard was an interesting character study.
I thought he gave a very subtle performance as this dude who has never moved out of his house. He's, I believe, past his 40s. I believe he actually has a birthday. I can't remember what he turns, but he loses one of his parents and he just decides to just continue living there. And a cousin moves in, and it's this kind of relationship that he's trying to build. He doesn't go full Arrested Development, but to a degree, it's kind of there. One of the things that I really liked about it is that it never shames him for the things that he's going through. You know, we were talking earlier about how, some characters, they'll have like a crazy dream sequence that they go through and we kind of judge them. This doesn't really look at the stuff that he does as judgmental. I think we all saw PVT Chat and how that kind of talks about masturbation to a degree. The director talked about how for this one, you see masturbation on screen from a woman's perspective, and it's always hypersexualized. Always hypersexualized. You see it from a man, and what is it? It's the creepiest thing possible. It's shameful. It's embarrassing. And here he's trying to get it from the character's perspective. Is it still weird? Of course. But I thought it was a very interesting character study of this man who's just grown there with his family and doesn't really know what his next step is.
All right, cool. The last one here is The Drover's Wife, The Legend of Molly Johnson. Tell me a little more about this
I'm a sucker for Westerns. This was a short story that became a play in which the actress in this movie is also the director, is also the writer, is also the producer, I want to say, and she also starred in the play as well. This looks at Australia, and it's a big FU to its history. She's a woman whose husband has passed away. You don't know exactly why, and an indigenous person comes in. He's darker skinned. They're hunting them all down. So now she has to kind of hide him from like the sheriff who's in town, who's trying to like, gather everybody up, and it reminds me a lot of, not Babadook. What was the follow-up for her?
Oh, The Nightingale. Yeah.
I worry that there may be a little bit of a trope there, as you know, an indigenous person who was slaved up helping, the white woman who's got the gun. That does seem to be, this is only the second time I've seen it, but it does seem to be a reoccurring thing that continues to pop up when covering Australia's history of all the stuff that they've gone through when it comes to trying to banish a lot of indigenous people and having a specific set of rules. But I liked it. It's very low. I don't want to call it low budget, but, usually when you see these grand westerns and these sweeping shots, they usually have a lot of money that goes into that. But they shot on location there in Australia. Sometimes they sneak in some nice little revenant shots going over cliffs and stuff. And I ended up enjoying the journey. It's maybe a little bit too long, and I haven't read the book. I haven't seen the play. But I enjoyed it for what it was, and I thought it was a pretty solid western.
Very cool, very cool. All right, back into discussions here with some more junior price selections. Let's go with Bantú Mama. This is a film about an Afro-European woman who gets arrested in the Dominican Republic and then is sheltered by a couple of minors, a couple of children. I think it's an interesting story about family and these relationships we can develop. It is a little bit slight. The whole film clocks in at under 80 minutes, but I think there is an emotional connection there that resonated. Art, what'd you think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the fact that she gets caught because she's dealing drugs and ends up being protected by a bunch of kids who are also dealing drugs. But the kids don't have parental figures. So she becomes the parental figure while trying to be in hiding there. And I loved that factor of every time that they're eating food, she's like, oh, you eat this? That's what we eat, but we call it something different. Oh, you say this phrase. Right. That's interesting. Well, we say the phrase this way. Hey, do this dance. No, we don't do that dance here. Well, technically you do. That would have been the original. There's all these little nuances there when dealing with their cultures and the mix of what's happened between them that I really enjoyed, kind of, going back to Ludi and how she was able to do that in the way that she speaks to, the different people around her workplaces. I really enjoyed this movie. I had Alina check it out before it had expired as well. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's practically the premise. I don't want to spoil anything else in the film, but no, this was a solid movie.
Cool. Let's get into a couple documentaries here, starting with The Lost Sons. Amanda, I know this is one that you thought was good as well. Tell me more about it.
It's basically a story about this baby who's kidnapped from a hospital, and then over a year later, there's this abandoned baby found in a totally different city, but close enough that they're like, hey, maybe this is that baby that got stolen from a hospital. And then the mom's like, yes, that's my kid. Turns out it wasn't. So this is kind of like the fallout of this crazy story where trying to figure out like who is this person's real family, what actually happened to this family's child, especially now that home DNA test kits and stuff are so common that it's a little bit easier to try to track down some of these people, whereas like back then it wasn't. It's pretty standard in kind of how it's told, and I think there's some areas where it could have been strengthened, but this is also one of the ones that I saw before the festival started, so I'm not as fresh on it, but I liked it. It was really interesting to see how like people just didn't want to know the truth. They would they'd rather just have whatever the situation be and ignore the fact that like, hey, maybe this situation didn't play out this way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. The better version would be Three Identical Strangers. Like
I was
that's
gonna say,
a story.
like we've seen it.
Yeah, that's a documentary that the way that's edited and kind of plays with the story to kind of like subvert your expectations. This is a little bit more standard, but nonetheless, it's a crazy thing that he went through.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Another documentary here, Lily Topples the World.
Let's go, Zach.
About
Let's
somebody
argue.
who might be familiar to people on the platform, Hevish5, the domino artist. Yeah, I don't think this is a particularly special documentary, but it does really profile her, and you get to see a little bit more about what it's like to, you know, live and make a living and trying to expand your reach through this platform that you build. And that's the things that I really liked about it. Plus, I could probably just watch a 3-hour documentary of setting up dominoes and knocking them over. So, yeah. I mean, look, some of the creations are just unreal here, and you're going to be blown away by it either way. So, I would highly recommend this one. It's a really pleasant documentary, even if it is, you know, not like a deep dive of any sorts.
Not too deep. Amanda, did you get to catch this one?
No, I didn't.
Damn, I'm curious your thoughts on this one because I really, really liked it, and I'm glad that it won the doc one. I also enjoyed the aspect that they cover in terms of like the new generation and how they consume content, and that's one of the biggest things that they try to like show you that this is a complete, you know, these aren't people who are, they didn't grow up with the TV set telling them what. Everything is on demand for them, and they get to choose how are you capturing their attention. And I love that right at the beginning, they show you the entire montage of all of the videos that she's made. So and the rest of it is how is she trying to build what she has? How is she trying to keep it? Is it annoying how many corporations she's worked with? For sure. But I really liked just following her journey and all of the people that she's impacted. And there's a really funny line from this little kid that I'll be quoting for a while.
Yeah. Another documentary that I know you liked quite a bit is When Claude Got Shot, a documentary about a weekend of gun violence and its impact on the lives of 3 people. Art, tell me more about it.
Claude gets shot. The kid who shot him
that much.
Tries to get somebody else, and that nurse shoots him.
Yeah.
It's that whole sequence of events told in a story that leans in no way other than the reality of the situation with gun violence, with trying your damn hardest to get out of an environment that, you know, should help you, and yet you still find yourself in there. Claude did everything to get out, still finds himself getting shot. The kid, his mom has done everything to put him in a better school, doesn't get rid of his cousins and the environment that he's in. The nurse, is she pro-gun? If it wasn't for her having it on her, she might not be here either. I thought it was a fascinating look at the entire trial that they go through. Claude's also trying to be a lawyer, so it's a fascinating look at his family and all of the struggles that they're going through because now his kids see a completely different point of view. Their dad got shot. I was completely invested in this. It's also produced by Snoop Dogg, so I'm very curious to see the release that they're going to have on this one, but I thought it was very emotional, and again, another unfiltered look where you're seeing just a family try so hard not to concave on itself because of the medical bills and everything else that springs upon this because, you know, of this incident that happened because of gun violence. I thought it was very impactful.
Yep, I agree.
Another documentary in South by that I think we all responded to was Clerk, the story of Kevin Smith. It tells his career from start to finish, a very like fanboyish documentary because it really gets into all the devotees and the world that he's built around him and that celebrates his content. But he is a pretty unique figure in the filmmaking world, in the type of fandom that he's been able to cultivate around his movies. I think for me, while I like the experience of watching it a lot, because I am a Kevin Smith fan, it was basically just telling me a bunch of stuff I knew about Kevin Smith. Yeah. But I think this kind of is maybe like the definitive look at his career.
Yes, sir.
What you guys like about it?
I like it's him. I've been saying this for years, but Kevin Smith at this point is a better speaker than he is a filmmaker, and he knows it, and he loves it too.
He says it.
If he didn't have this kind of stuff, if he hadn't built out his career around this other way, he wouldn't still be making movies. So like, you know, Clerks has always meant a lot to me. You know, I worked at a job that was very similar to that for a very long time, and you just resonate with these characters a lot growing up, and it's just it's really interesting to see a career how it jumps from, you have something like Clerks and then Mallrats not really being that far off tonally, but then the whole world just being like, no, we gave
but
you
how
your
he explains
chance.
it. Yeah, how he explains it. The intelligentsia said, no, we had you for that moment. We don't need you for this next one. And he went, all right, well, if you don't think I'm good enough, I'm just going to go to the people who already think that I am. And I think that's the best part of the documentary in terms of realizing that you have your own voice. Focus on those people. We always talk about a documentary that is completely, certified by the subject. This is Kevin Smith through and through. Yeah. This is the best definitive one. And you get interviews from everyone around him.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think with those documentaries that come from, that come sort of co-signed by the subject, maybe they're treated with kid gloves a lot, but I think there are some parts of the documentary where they really do challenge him on a couple things, and they ask him like, oh, you failed. What was it like to fail here? So it's not all happiness in this documentary, which I appreciated. Yeah. An interesting film, or at least from what I've heard that I haven't got around to yet, Inbetween Girl. Art, tell me a little bit more about it.
Man, did you see this?
I did.
What'd you think?
I liked it, but at the same time, I was just like,
it's frustrated.
It is. I want to go up,
slap that boy.
I know. He rocks up to the window, and I'm like, I'm like, girl, please. Like, it's one of these things I want to be like, please respect yourself more. But at the same time, it's all like, you're not the problem. You're just falling victim to the predator. But like, I hate this for you, sweetie. It's one of those movies. And then she does come full circle with it, at least by the end. But it was just like, ooh, it's an honest coming of age.
Yeah. It is. You're following this girl who's not only dealing with the divorce of her parents, there's also that factor that it's her dad who's Asian, and she's never really been able to connect with him as much as he's now doing with his new family. But her mother's also white. So there's that whole part where there's that disconnect with her mom while this whole thing is happening with this dude. And there's a lot of I think that the way that the dialogue is written, and even from the performances, because they come off so much as teenagers. We were just talking about women as losers, right?
Yeah.
How do you got her playing a teenager? No, this girl looks like a teenager.
Exactly.
Excuse me. So it sells it a lot more. You're actually seeing how easily someone can be manipulated and just used. I don't know if you saw the movie Banana Splits. Yeah. That one's on Netflix. It kind of reminded me of that, where you kind of have this scenario where you got two girls who are, in Banana Splits they do know, but here where they don't really know that they're kind of going for the same dude and all the ins and outs that are happening within that. But I thought this was a solid movie that I hope gets seen by a lot of people who sadly maybe connect to it, but more so could be a warning of like, no, don't fall for that.
Don't fall for it.
Lock your windows.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it could do really well on Netflix, but like, no, I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that this is kind of more in line with like your the half of it type things, less so than
and Marvelous in the Black Hole when we were talking about that being a movie that should be out there for kids her age who are also going through that.
Yep, absolutely.
You should catch it, Zach.
I want to. Let's talk about language lessons. What I thought was the more delightful movies in the entire South by Southwest lineup. This is the feature debut of Natalie Morales, an actress who I've liked quite a bit, especially since she first showed up in Parks and Recreation. But I think she's very delightful in a lot of different things. Right. Co-written with Mark Duplass, who's known for these kind of low-budget, lo-fi indie movies. And this is another COVID movie, although COVID isn't a plot point in it. It is clearly made under COVID restrictions.
That was dope.
Premise here is the premise here is that it is a series of language lessons that Natalie Morales' character has been paid to give to Mark Duplass' character to teach him Spanish, and the unlikely friendship that they develop through these different calls. While there are moments here that I do feel like they maybe force the sentimentality a little bit, their personalities are just so winning, their banter is just so charming that I maybe forgive the forced seriousness and really just buy into their their congeniality, you know? It's just fun to listen to both of them. At one point in the movie, Mark Duplass says, it's a lot of fun to listen to you talk. And I just really agree. So I was super, super charmed by it. I was super charmed by them. I think, you know, obviously they set up this plot that gives you a really restricted type of story, but they kept it varied enough that it won me over. So yeah, one of my favorites from the festival as a whole. Art, what did you think about this one?
I still think it's Duplass getting language lessons. Like, he literally got Rosetta Stone, and he was just film movie, make the whole thing tax deductible. But hey, it worked. There were parts where it's like, it definitely seemed like they were riffing off of each other. Like, he was actually you know, you learn your lessons, but then you actually have to apply them in the real world. He's like, no, let me go a step. What if I improvise in a movie and try to see what
a
back
lot
and
of his
forth
movies tend to have like these improvised scripts, and I feel like for sure moments of this were improvised.
I'm so mad that it works so well. It's so genius, you know? But I do like how the story progresses and their relationship and like the revelations that they have in between. I know a lot of people were divided on the ending. Or had different interpretations of the ending was something that we were discussing earlier as well. But no, I thought it was a fun little flick.
Yeah, I agree. It's really charming. I did feel like some of it got a little bit heavy-handed at areas, which I think is playing into why people are interpreting things in the ending differently than they probably should be. But it was just charming. It was nice. It made me cry or at least tear up more than any of the other movies that I watched, and I watched some like pretty emotional movies in this. So yeah, no, it was good. I recommend.
What would you give it, Zach?
I liked also.
I think we all gave it a 3.5.
I mean, I gave it a 4, but partially that's because like I like that they took this experimental approach and saw it through to like a really satisfying way, right? Like they set up rules for their movie. There's only 2 people on screen, and they always communicate through this video back and
100
forth.
lessons.
And they basically exploited that. They exploited that to the best that they could. I think this is like the best possible movie you could get from that kind of construction. So I part of me is just sort of awarding them for a job well done, if you want to call it that.
Would you watch it in theaters?
I think I would, yeah. I think I like them both enough that I would be satisfied with a movie like this.
Okay.
You know, I think there's a lot of things that are cool about it. I really like the bilingual aspect of it, even if it is, you know, a very Americanized Spanish throughout. But they also play into that too. Like, he says El Casa Grande, and they subtitle it The Big House with like 2 E's instead of I. I like how they play around with stuff like that. So it's a fun movie for me.
Cool. Dope.
Just so you know, you do have it at a 3.5 on Letterboxd, though.
I have it on as a 3.5 on Letterboxd, but I have it as a 4 in my heart.
I get that. I understand that. Okay.
You put a heart on it. You put a heart on it.
Yeah.
There's a movie that got a lot of festival buzz, but I didn't get around to it. Both of you did. So tell me more about Andrea Riseborough in Here Before, because this is the one that I feel worst about having missed at the fest.
Anyone who says it's not good is lying to you. Someone said it starts off as like a thriller, and then it starts off more like psychological something, and then it doesn't pan out at the end. Boy, I don't know what movie you saw, but that stuff came in and blended beautifully. She has always acted with her eyes. Yeah. But I don't think she's ever acted more with her eyes than she has in this movie. As it's following her because I believe she has lost a child, and the little girl next door reminds her of her daughter. So much so, and believes that she needs to do everything to take care of her because she doesn't believe that her mom's doing everything. You know, there for her when she goes to like pick her up for school, inviting her over to dinner, all these different things that start building up into a lot of, you know, emotional baggage that they have not resolved as a family themselves. And then just, you know, the altercations that happen with the neighbor. I thought it was beautifully shot. It's a little slow sometimes, but I believe it all ties in beautifully. I was skeptical about it at first, but it's Andrea, and I felt really stupid for thinking that she wasn't going to deliver. And of course she delivers. Kills it in the role.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, because there's a direction you think it's going, and then it doesn't go there. And then you realize, ooh,
it had me believe
kids,
something
like,
that I shouldn't even have believed. I was like, oh, for sure. Then this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I was like, why did I even think that?
It doesn't. Yeah. And it'll give you like a little hint at one point.
So
then
good.
I'm like, what's going on there? And then it comes full circle, and you're
I want to
like,
see it again.
damn, yeah. And it's just really, really well handled. And you know, like every time she's like, okay, I'll drive you home. In your head, you're like, just leave that kid there. Just leave that kid there. Just leave that kid
You're
there.
also answering all these things going like, but how far should you really be motherly?
Yeah, exactly.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I got to catch up with that one.
Yeah, you do.
Yep.
Yeah. Art, let's talk about We Are as Gods, the documentary, a really interesting documentary here, co-directed by David Alvarado and Jason Sussberg. They're taking a look primarily at the life and career of Stuart Brand, scientist, environmentalist, futurist of different sorts, and his thinking about how we can change the future of our world, of our environments, primarily through his experimentation with de-extinction, bringing back to life different species that have gone extinct. They are already doing this with the American chestnut tree. They are trying to do this with woolly frickin' mammoths. And it's obviously fascinating because this is just, futuristic science explained by obviously extremely intelligent people. It's more than just they have the one idea, but the way that they're able to connect this one idea to a larger thing. Like personally, it would take me so long to get from bring back woolly mammoths to help protect the permafrost layer around the earth. But this is the types of thinkings that these people that they're showing you are capable of. I love getting to get into this world, but I also really like that they present to you a bunch of people who disagree with his opinions.
Grill
that they give
him.
the other side. They really interrogate the central premise of all of these philosophies. So it's not a one-sided doc at all. It is not one of these like co-signed let me get in on this documentary game productions that we're talking about. This is real like investigative science documentary filmmaking, and I thought this was a really good one. Art, what did you take away from it?
I've reviewed this on Intercut, and I didn't even realize it. I caught this last year. I'm watching it this time around,
really?
and I realized, I don't know how, maybe it was a part of that light South by Southwest thing that they had last year.
Yeah.
Everything they were saying, I was like, I've seen this. No, I have seen this doc. By the time they got into the debate where it's like Jurassic Park, that was literally the people who were against them. They're like, have y'all seen Jurassic Park? It's a no for me. That's when I was like, oh my goodness, I have seen this one. This and Human Nature, which also has a lot of stuff with George Church, who appears in this movie. While Human Nature is getting even deeper into the side of how we could use, these gene manipulations to help things like MS, to help any birth defects and such. This dude over here, Brand, is a man who may not even be alive to see the stuff that he's tried so hard to advocate for just because people are too scared to push it. Am I scared of it? 100%. I'm not saying I'm not. But I'm so glad you saw this. I was looking forward to it. I had already seen it. This was the one I saw before Human Nature, but I always felt, I always attributed Human Nature to being this movie and everything Human Nature is about into one. I'd already caught it. But catching it again, I was like, let me let it finish. And I watched it all over again, and it's just as good. It's just as fantastic.
Yeah. I really like these documentarians. They previously made a documentary called The Immortalists about these scientists who look at death as something that can be cured. And they also made a Bill Nye documentary. So they make these really compelling looks at scientists that work in these documentary formats. I think, two guys who are definitely worth paying attention to whatever movie they make from here on out.
Yeah, but very good doc.
One more that I have in the junior price section, although I think you might argue with me here, is The Spine of the Night, an animated fantasy horror epic that was maybe a touch too gruesome for me, but there's going to be people who really, really jive with this one. Art, were you one of those people?
I think I am, bro. Voiced by Richard E. Grant. By Lucy Lawless. They said they shot this entire thing.
Voiced by Patton Oswalt.
Okay, bro, when it's Patton Oswalt on screen. You were talking about like when you know who that is? Bro, here, Patton Oswalt's voice, I knew it. I could not take the king seriously. I'm sorry. This is a movie where supposedly they shot the entire thing live action. You know, obviously not a huge budget. Then they took all that and they made it into something. You know, it's like the Snyder Cut, and then they added the visual effects, which was sketching the entire thing out. I really liked it. I like the world that they build of these leaves that they consume, and it's able to give them these powers. You know, it's your cliche things about these higher up, like, you know, the people who are running everything, the philosophers, the teachers trying to take all of this knowledge so that all of the rest of the villagers don't know anything, and all of that is consumed for the people who have the books. I thought the aesthetics, not just of the blue leaves, but the bad guy who's got the two little fingers thing that he uses to move the stuff. I would love to see this as an actual live action with a budget. I thought this was fantastic. I am a big fan. Let's go. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, the animation style was cool too. I think the thing is that it is a very convoluted story, and that's maybe where it lost me, especially I caught this one a little bit late at night, and it's a lot to pay attention to late at night. But yeah, I'm also less of a fantasy person generally.
I'm not a fantasy person either.
I think I think if you are, though, there is so much to chew on.
It's
here.
cool.
So it's not a movie that I would unrecommend. It's just not for me, not for Zach's, I guess. Good. Yeah. Okay. Combo price. These are the top tier South by Southwest movies. We got one movie that only Art has seen. So hit us with Not Going Quietly, which I believe was the grand jury choice for a documentary out of South by Southwest.
Now, we always talk about, like we were just saying earlier, some of these documentaries very much are like, you know, they're advocating for something. It's a call to action. This is that. This is that 100%. But you're following this dude who is fighting for workers' rights and such. And then he starts like deteriorating, and you're still seeing him fight for all of these rights that's following. It is a gut punch all throughout, because his whole thing is speaking, and throughout the movie, he's losing his ability to do so. I don't know what to tell you. It deserves, obviously, the award. It was a fantastic look at all the work that he's doing, and it's just frustrating, bro. Like, it's sad, for sure. And obviously they want to sprinkle in the hope in there. But the way that they just go up to these politicians, the people who are supposed to help you, and they just shut you out. They just close the door. What's the point? Sometimes, it's frustrating, man. But a very, very great doc looking at just the working conditions and just, you know, fighting for the rights for people even before, you know, it was something that hit home to you, I guess.
Sounds extremely affecting. Something else that's probably extremely affecting in a different way. Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, a history of folk horror. This is a 3+ hour look at the history of folk horror. That was why I stayed away from it at first, and then I heard nothing but the highest of praise from people. This is another one that I'm a little bit pissed that I missed out on, but Amanda, tell me, what did you get from this movie?
Everything.
I've
been behind the scenes. I've been like making notes about videos I've been planning to make on how, like, you know, Eggers approaches things like The Witch and The Lighthouse and the original stories that they're based off of. And now I'm like, why bother?
My video is go watch that movie.
Pretty much. It's like, I do think there's still areas to talk about, but it's just like, it would just be like scratching the surface to tell people to go and then go watch this 3+ hour documentary. But it is so well handled and very interesting, because like you see the time and you're like, I don't know, but it works. And it's like it's an exhaustive documentary. Like somebody could literally make a university course around this movie and it would have value. So yeah.
Because it is technically also in chapters, in terms of like you're seeing the, like, you know, the traditional folklore, and then they kind of show you how it spreads to other countries as well. It tells you about the stuff, you know, not just that happened, you know, in the UK and Ireland, but they get over to, you know, America. You know, they got to La Llorona, which was, when that happened, I go, oh, this is everything and some.
Yeah.
Amanda said it perfectly. This is the ultimate. I don't even want to call it video essay. We've seen a lot of documentaries. We're realizing, like, wow, this is a video YouTube essay with a budget. I think this is just above and beyond. They're able to get some really good interviewees here. They're able to really do just this extensive research that it solidified it, bro. This is the doc when it comes to folklore.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, let's talk about Who We Are, a chronicle of racism in America. A really fascinating look at the way that racism has reverberated in all these different aspects of society, in all these different places around America, as told by Jeffrey Robinson, this speaker who's at the central part of this documentary. I was DMing with Art about it because I thought it was one of the ones that it's really worth catching out of the festival, and I compared it a lot to 13th in the way that it is able to very explicitly lay out the chain of reaction in how the systems upon which America was built led to the problems that we have today. And these are not like new creations or new phenomena when we are talking about race issues. These are elements that have been bred from the society that we set up. I thought it was extremely smart. I feel like I took a lot away from it. Art, you liked it too, right?
Incredible.
Yeah.
You think we have too many of these, and then you get a guy who just breaks it down and goes, yeah, well, there's like 50 states. There's like a lot that happened. And, he shows you a $20 bill, and then he shows you a quote from the man who's on the $20 bill that we still use as legal tender today. He goes and he's looking at these museums, and he shows you the difference between the shackles, because these shackles are meant for like the really big men, and the little tiny ones are for the kids, for when when you shackle them up and when you sell them. And it's mixing all of his talk and his different, visits to all of these museums and places, to him just walking down the street and having a conversation with a dude holding a Confederate flag. Mm-hmm. Realizing that, that's not going to go anywhere. I got to cut it off. Let that man shake your hand. And then in the car just venting about, if he doesn't do it, then who else will? I think it's a masterpiece of a doc. I'm not gonna lie. I think comparing it to 13th is fantastic, because I know 13th has been one of the ones that really had opened a lot of people's eyes. It pretty much took the book, the new Jim Crow, and made it into a visualization to a degree, even referencing that film. This is, I just the way he speaks, the way that he goes about it, the way that he just is able to seamlessly connect it and show, like you said, how it's a part of your daily lives as well. You could see it as not being malicious or something that brings ill intent, but it's like learning the history of it and realizing that it's not that far gone. It wasn't that long ago. Deep stuff. And the title comes into play. Who we are. This is what made us. So there's a reckoning. There's stuff that needs to be fixed. There's stuff that's still there. Really good.
Absolutely.
As soon as you recommended it to me, I was like, I'll save it for later. I started watching that. I was like, damn, he's getting into some stuff. So it's a really good doc.
Right. This last doc, I had it in the junior price, and you told me, no, bump that bad boy up. So let's talk about Dear Mr. Brody. It's the latest documentary from Keith Maitland, who previously made the animated documentary Tower, another interesting film. But this one is about Michael Brody Jr., a hippie millionaire who promised to give away his $25 million inheritance in the hopes of achieving world peace. This is a very interesting movie, partially because a central hook in it is in his campaign to give away his money. He requested that people write into him with things they needed and things they wanted to do with the money. And I love in the way that this documentary is assembled, how it gives you these different portraits of all these different people's lives. It's such an expansive look at so many things in its focus. I really liked how it was put together. Art, what struck you about Dear Mr. Brody?
That I saw it twice. That you should know very little. I know it's tempting to just like wiki the man, but I think sit with the doc, see how it takes you through the story, and just that idea of seeing a snapshot, not even a snapshot, it's letters from people during that time. And how they're really no different from today. I think a fascinating part of the documentary, and I know they kind of had it in the notes, so it's as much as I could say that they try to find the people who wrote these letters, and that's a fascinating part of the documentary. I'm very curious to see how they're going to cut up the trailer because of the way that the story is told as well, but it is one that I sat with through twice during the fest. There are aspects of it that I can't wait to talk about later in terms of how a second viewing showcases things, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I think people should check it out. Maybe it does too much sometimes. Maybe tries to cover a lot.
I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot going on visually as well in the film, where there's certain sequences that are a little bit animated and things that are framed really pretty, the way that they showcase the letters. But I do think it kind of serves this film ultimately, because it is kind of this movie that's trying to bounce around between all these different perspectives. And it's fascinating. You know, it's this guy tried to become GoFundMe all by himself. And it's a bad idea for GoFundMe. It's definitely a bad idea for one guy.
Let me bring two other ones that I don't know if you had mentioned just really quick. Fruits of Labor was one that I know a lot of people were loving. Alina caught this one. I was able to catch part of it, just talking about a lot of migrant workers and even legal workers who are here in the United States who tend to all of the, the fields and such without having anything in their favor because they don't have enough money to do anything else, so they're just stuck in this perpetual cycle. I highly recommend that one, especially Lena did. Through the Plexi-Glass was another one that, man, I was so split on because I love this movie. It is this woman who took this hotel that was on Congress, tried to fix it up, and it was just a bunch of eccentric people who would come in, many of which, she found the rooms to be even dirtier after they left, had to hunt them down for their money. But it was all these people. If you've ever bdon't to Austin, especially, near 6th Street and all that, there is a really big homeless problem in Austin. A lot of people who need help, not a lot of people who need, I don't know, rehab. They need assistance with certain abuses that they have. But the ending pissed me off. That's all I'll say. I'll talk to you guys after this. I don't want to spoil it. Wiki this one, though. Made me so mad. Continue, Zach.
Let's get to the 3 films that I think make up our best 3 out of the festival. We actually recorded after credits for all 3 of these. So if you want to hear us talk about Violet, about The Fallout, about Ninjababy, go ahead and check out those videos. But I do want to ask you guys, if you are choosing the grand jury prize winner out of Sundance, which movie are you going with? Amanda, why don't you kick us off?
I hate being first. I don't know. I really liked all 3 of these movies for different reasons. I feel like I'm probably leaning towards The Fallout. I just really liked how it juggled everything that it was doing. It's such a serious topic, but it still brought in the levity that it needed to because these are fundamentally still just teenagers. So I liked The Fallout. I would go with that one.
I think Ninjababy.
Really?
But that's right now. I rewatch all 3 of them, and depending on the scenario,
The Fallout's the one I saw most recently, so it's the closest in my mind.
There you go.
It's one of those.
But they're all good. It's a solid 3. Which one would you pick?
Absolutely.
Say Violet.
It's tough. I kind of think I'm between Violet and The Fallout, and part of me wants to go Violet just so we can split it all. But man, The Fallout is really, really good, and we talked about it obviously in our video, but it also feels like it feels like of the 3, maybe the more important of these. And something that we talked in our South by Southwest video, something that we talked about in our Sundance video is that there were a couple titles that played Sundance that felt like they maybe belonged at another movie. A couple Tribeca movies and South by Southwest movies thrown in there. The Fallout to me feels like a Sundance movie. The Fallout to me feels like this new American drama, this new filmmaker coming to the forefront. I think there's a lot that I really liked about this one. I don't know.
You would have played that in the narrative competition.
Because I really, really liked all 3 of these.
I also think Violet should have been a next. Violet could have been in the next.
Violet totally could have been a next. Totally could have been a next. I might have language lessons up on this top tier. What about you guys? Is there one that to you personally that you maybe put among that top tier of Violet, Fallout, and Ninjababy?
These were my top 3. So.
Yeah.
Narrative-wise, I also had Here Before and Spine of Night up there.
Here Before.
And then doc-wise, Mr. Brody, Woodlands, Who We Are.
Yeah.
Or Claude.
Yeah. Very cool. So, yeah, a lot of really exciting movies coming out of South by Southwest.
Wasn't a bad fest.
Plenty of things on the radar. Yeah. I also caught up with In the Same Breath and the Sparks Brothers, 2 documentaries that I read.
Sundance.
In the Same Breath.
And
what do you think of In the Same Breath? Because I thought it was really remarkable.
Really good. And I feel like it didn't shy away from calling out like everybody in the world. It wasn't like we're going to be a shill for this and then be like, we're so much smarter. It's like, nah, everybody was dumb as shit. And I'm going to tell you exactly why.
She's the GOAT, bro.
I also love that.
Yeah, she's great.
The documentary is like, you know, China brags about having this best system in the world, but look at all these failures. By the way, still more people died in America, but look at how bad China did. It's really great.
Bro, she's fantastic.
It's just some really incredible investigative journalism. The way like that she gets security footage from the clinic near the wet market. Unreal that you can pull some stuff like that. So that one's remarkable. Sparks Brothers is a lot of fun. Definitely a lot of good stuff that played at South by Southwest. We went really long, as we always do when we talk about festival stuff. So I think we'll bump our Snyder talk to a separate video and wrap it up here. You can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, at ZShevich. That's ZSHEV as in Violet, ICH. Amanda, where can people find more from you?
People can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, Letterboxd, and a lot of other places under Amandathejedi.
Art?
You can find me at LME Explain on Twitter, on YouTube, and every week here on the Intercut Podcast.
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut Podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher. I like Overcast. And then don't just catch the audio podcast, catch the video feed too by subscribing to us on youtube.com/intercutpod, where you can catch our bright smiling faces as we break down the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of Intercut every Monday. Please leave us a comment, like the video, consider heading over to iTunes to give us a 5-star review. Shout out to our listeners in Finland for putting us in the TV and podcast chart, TV and film podcast charts out there. That's a new one. I don't think we've been in Finland yet. Like our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. All of them are at Intercut Pod to get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, from Amanda, from all the guests that we feature here on Intercut. Check out our Patreon to support the show. Get access to episode outlines early. Get access to the private channels on the Intercut Discord. Get access to entire episodes early. Lots of cool benefits available on Patreon. By the way, there's also that Discord. You can check the link in the description for that. So thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, and then what?